Hi, thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's Morgan James book launch. And I am really excited because we've got a great author. My name is Jim Howard. I'm the publisher for Morgan James. And today we have Bonnie O'Neill. And Bonnie is the author of Chronic Hope, Raising a Child with Chronic Illness with Grace, Courage, and Love. Bonnie, thank you for taking the time today to talk with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Jim. I'm excited to share with everyone about the book and just tell them all about it.
It's an amazing book. So, when we get started here, this is such a personal topic for many people, and I know for you as well. But what led you to write Chronic Hope?
Well, writers are always told to write what they know, and there are probably few topics that I know better than the impact of a chronic illness on a family's life. So before I was born, my family consisted of an 8-year-old, my mom and dad, 8-year-old little boy, 6-year-old little girl, and my mom was expecting another child. And my brother, Johnny, died at age 8 of undiagnosed type 1 diabetes. And you can imagine what a shock that was in my family, on my heavily pregnant mother at the time. And then, so they decided to have another child. And that child was me afterward. I was born as the child to replace the one that my parents had lost. And then when my sister Barb was 16, she was diagnosed with the same disease, type 1 diabetes, and I was 8 years old at the time. And so I've always lived under the specter of this disease. We always were afraid that my other sister and I would get it. I certainly lived with the knowledge and understanding of how difficult the disease was to manage because I had a front row seat at watching my sister try to manage it. And then 25 years later, after my sister was diagnosed, I saw the same signs of this awful disease in my son, Austin, who was 5 years old at the time. So just so everyone knows, it's frequent urination and intense thirst. Those are the two big warning signs. And so I just diagnosed Austin in our house, in our ground floor powder room, went to the pharmacy, bought a test kit like I had used so many times in my life, and I diagnosed him. And what I wasn't expecting was how deeply this third diagnosis in my family was going to impact me. And so because it was such a personal disease, I just was riddled with anger. I was angry at God. I was angry at the world. I was afraid. I had intense fear because I'd seen my brother die from it, or I knew of my brother dying from it. And then there are all the other kinds of emotions about just feeling so lonely. You're carrying this disease that nobody else knows anything about. They're not walking in your moccasins, so to speak. Resentment with my husband because he was handling the disease different from how I was handling it. Just this desire for control. I think the book, so much about the book is actually, even though it's called Chronic Hope, so much of it is about control because we have to learn to accept where we are and release control before we can attend to all the muck we're feeling and ultimately get to a place of hope. And so there really weren't any resources on the market at all that addressed what a caregiver of a young child with a chronic illness is going through. And so at the time that I started, before I started writing the book, I was asked by JDRF, the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, to be a part of their National Speakers Bureau and to speak on sometimes giving a research update as the keynote speaker. And then they asked me to talk about the psychosocial impact of type 1 diabetes on a family. And so it was actually at the first the first education conference where I spoke on the topic, and that was November of 2016, that one of the people in the audience said to me, "So when's your book coming out?" And I just laughed. I'm not writing a book. But I guess that seed was in there, So that was how it came about.
Yeah, it's amazing when we go through our own journeys. Oftentimes we don't think about the fact that there are other people who are on very similar journeys, and there are a lot of families who are dealing with chronic illness and maybe a different illness than what
Right.
your family suffered, and you
Right.
know that. But chronic illness has this massive impact on the whole family. And when we share our story, we find this is one of the beautiful things that I love about being a publisher is I get to help people share their stories, because what we found is that when we're open to sharing our personal journey, we know that the reader can pull down the veil of vulnerability, if you will, long enough to connect deep enough so that your words can penetrate and they can see, hey, I'm not alone. There are
Yeah,
others who have gone through this journey, and the things I'm dealing with, the feelings and emotions that I'm fighting are the same, and there are ways around it and ways through it. So, well, number one, thank you for sharing your story. I think that that is just an amazing thing to do, to help someone else in their journey, and taking the time that you do for the research and the speaking and the education. It definitely has an impact on people who are going through these.
yeah, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And the book is written in narrative and reflection form. So the
Mm,
narrative obviously talks about what it's like to raise a child with a specific particular disease, but the language in on all of the reflection part is just much more expansive. It's what is it like to raise a child with any chronic disorder, and how is that on you, and how does the particular emotion that we're tackling in that chapter, how do you walk that out in your life, and how do you find healing in that particular emotional stress that you're dealing with in your own life. And then I have at the end of each chapter 3 questions. They're called the heart to heart questions, and it's just an opportunity for the reader to then engage with their own story and say, wow, how did I deal with anger um, in this particular situation that I'm dealing with? And one of the things that I'm finding from my readers, and I'm doing some interviews, they're up on my YouTube channel, of parents who have children with different chronic illnesses, not just type 1 diabetes. And they are all saying that the stories are resonating with them because the stories are similar for any, irrespective of which chronic disorder you're referring to. And the disorder could be not a disease, it could be ADHD, it could be a learning difference, whatever it is. And I've even had people share with me that even though they don't have a child with any sort of chronic disability, they are finding hope because this is the human condition. We deal with anger when we don't have, when this isn't the life we were expecting. We deal with control issues. We deal with not wanting to accept it. And so the things that I talk about in the book are common to all humanity, irrespective of what your life story is.
mm, excellent. So you mentioned the way the book was written in reflection and narrative. And I saw in the introduction, you say the stories aren't linear, but
Yeah.
they form a spiral. So what does that mean?
Yeah. Oh, well, that was something that I just kept playing with as I was conceiving of, the outline for the book and how do I really want to tell this story. And I realized that the backbone of a healthy family really is emotionally healthy parents. And
Mm,
so we have to start there. So if you find yourself in a situation like involving your child, or even again, more expansively, just something that's going on in your family, you need to begin with yourself as the parent or the caregiver. And so then once you attend to those issues and how you're doing, then you can kind of move out in the spiral to the relationship between you and the child who is affected by this disease or disorder. And that's a relationship that is very complicated. It suffers a lot and risks being weakened significantly by this relationship, where the parent really becomes a caregiver in addition to just the advice giving parents. And so the importance for a parent of knowing when to take off the teacher's hat and just like stop talking about the disease and what they should be doing or not doing. There's a lot of complications there. That child doesn't necessarily have the same freedoms that the other children in the family do. So that relationship has to be tended to next. And then you keep moving along in the spiral to the greater family. And I've already touched on this, but the relationship between the couple is so deeply affected by a diagnosis like what my family went through, because you have your own ways of dealing with it. There's typically not a rule book. And so you might come at it differently. And there's a lot of feelings of just being abandoned by your partner because you don't feel like you're understanding each other. So those things have to be talked through and forgiven. Forgiveness is a big thing I talk about in that section. And then the relationships between the siblings, those are different too. Depending on how old the other children are at that point of diagnosis, there can be feelings of jealousy. There can be feelings that, oh, well, mommy loves this, my brother or sister more than me because she spends all this time with that one. So you have to attend to those relationships. And then the relationships between the siblings themselves, not just your relationship with the other children, but the relationships between the siblings. So we just keep spiraling outward. And then eventually in the final section of the book, I talk about life in the greater world outside, like vacations that go awry and what happens when it's time to go to college and, those sorts of things out into the wider world. So I found that just playing with this spiraliness of it helped me to frame up the story better. And then I realized a couple of other things in this spiral. One is that as we keep traveling along and getting wider and wider out in the spiral, there will be emotions like fear
Mm.
and not wanting to release control and anger, all of those things that we're talking about that at this earlier on stage, we'll feel like we have conquered it.
Yeah.
We'll have a measure of success. And then it will surprise us and kind of trip us up when farther out on the spiral, we revisit it. And we'll think, oh, I thought I was finished with, the fears that I was carrying. And then here they are again. And so, but the thing is, when we do revisit them, we're farther out on the spiral. We're farther out on our journey of hope. So it doesn't look the same as it did when we were dealing with the initial shock of it. And then I think the third spiral that I discovered also as I was writing, because writers write to discover. We don't know exactly what's in there when we get started, but we write and we discover. And one of the things I discovered that it is the way out of this cave that we find ourselves in when we feel like the world has collapsed around us at diagnosis day. The way out is deeper in. We can't get out until we go in and have a look around inside and see what's actually there and
Mm.
name it and attend to it. And then we get healing from it, and then we can come out. But the way out is really by going deeper in first. So there's a lot of spirals. I don't think you need your Dramamine to read it, but
No, but what a beautiful picture of how to handle as life comes along, because life doesn't stop. Life is
right.
still going to happen, and you're still going to have to function in this great big crazy world. But now you can start, like you said, in and tight, and then
Yeah,
let
yeah,
that grow as you grow,
yes,
and eventually you learn that it's okay, and that you
yeah,
can move through
yeah.
the spaces. That's
I
beautiful.
honestly think so many of the lessons that I learned in writing the book, they have helped me to navigate these COVID days
Mm.
because this wasn't the life we expected.
It's a whole new world.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So Bonnie, what are your greatest hopes for the reader as they read Chronic Hope?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want people to feel the permission to feel what they feel.
Mm.
And, I think when you are raising a child with a chronic illness, you are the last person you want to attend to. You're constantly reminded that my child has it so much harder than I do. I can't have a pity party for myself. If I'm feeling anger or fear or bitterness, jealousy, whatever I'm feeling, those are stupid feelings. And I just need to, get over it and remember that my child has it much harder than I do. Well, that doesn't fix anything. That's just trying to get out before we go deeper in. And so I wrote the book just about as raw as I could make it. When I was doing the final edits before sending the manuscript to you guys, um, I had put it down for a little while, just to get that fresh read of it. And there were some chapters where I thought, girlfriend, are you really going to put this out there? You look awful in this book. Some people have said to me, is Austin, my son is Austin, is he concerned about how he's going to look in the book? I'm like, oh, no, no, no. No. This is how do I look in this book? It's about as raw and honest as and friends who know me have attested to that.
Mhm.
It's honest, it's raw, because I want readers to know that they have permission to feel what they feel.
Yeah.
And then I want them to step into that invitation to attend to what they're noticing in their life and to try to either use the strategies in the book that are not written in a self-help tone at all. It's just my reflections on life. Parents of a child with chronic illness have enough shoulds in their lives and should not. This is not about that, but just that they can notice, and then even in those heart-to-heart questions, begin to do some of their own self-work to figure out what is really tripping me up. So that's what I hope for them. I've also created a 30-day hope journal that my book launch team is working through right now, that just sort of extends the learnings of chronic hope. So that'll be up on my website after the book launches on April 13th, and anybody can just download that for free and just, sort of work through their own story. Chronic hope is my story. They can work through their own. And then I think finally, if this isn't too grand of a hope,
Yeah.
it's that, and I hear this again and again from people that I talk to who have a child with a chronic disease. Dealing with that as a parent actually makes us better people.
Mm.
And so that is my hope. I've had to learn how to release control in my life. And learning to do that has helped me to live with greater interior freedom. It's helped me to live with greater love, greater courage. It's helped me to let go of fear. It's helped me to offer more grace to people that I'm impatient with. And so ultimately, yes, it's led me to deeper hope. So that is my very lofty hope for this book.
Well, I don't think it's lofty at all. I think with your book, the way it's written, and with the reader, I think that's what we expect. So I am so honored to be a part of your journey and sharing this book with the world. And I think everyone watching this, you need to look around, because if you're not dealing with a chronic illness in your family, you know someone who is. I can almost promise you that. This book is written for understanding, and it's written for healing, and it's written for help and hope. So
Mm.
I encourage you to grab a copy of this book, read it with someone else in mind if it's not your journey, and share it with other people. And Bonnie, you mentioned the workbook, and I know there are going to be people who are watching this right now who may even have a copy of the book already, or who are waiting to get a hold of their copy. How can they connect with you? How can they find out more about what you're doing, get access to all the materials that you have, and things like that?
Sure. So the best place is my website, bonnieoneil.com, BONNIEONEIL, no apostrophe in there, .com. And you can find everything about the book there. I am Bonjour Bonio because I love France. Bonjour Bonio on Instagram, and Bonnie Woods O'Neill on Facebook. And my YouTube channel is Bonnie O'Neill. This is the book, Show and Tell, if anyone wants to see it. It comes out on April 13th, available for pre-order now on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Books A Million. And I just hope you'll go on the journey with me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Bonnie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Your book is such an encouragement, and you are an inspiration. So we are really happy to share you out to the world, and let people find out more about chronic hope. So thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
Thanks so much, Jim. And thanks, everyone.
Awesome. And you can get a copy of Bonnie's book anywhere books are sold, online, offline, your favorite bookstore. So I encourage you to do that now, and we'll see you on our next one.
Bye.